So let's just talk about some of these fundamental principles of the practice, of the physical practice itself. How do you do this practice? I think I do exist. I'm gonna do new whiteboard and use classic whiteboard. Hey, classic whiteboard. All right, so I'm gonna use some arrows and I'm gonna draw 4 different directions. Medicine is a form of functional grouping. They group the body into systems. We have cardiovascular systems, into pulmonary systems, all kinds of systems, right? Skeletal system, muscular system, like there's all these systems. It's just functional grouping. They're just putting things in categories so that they can work with it. And by work with it, I mean do stuff, such as surgery and health-related things. All right, so I've created 4 directions and I'm making 4 boxes. So the basic idea is that every human being has attention. We're working with it constantly. It's always there. So I'm not going to get that basic because that's a little bit more, that's not necessarily how to do the practice. That would be more why to do the practice. What is the practice? And that'll be in a book someday. But the little dot in the center represents human attention. And I've given a good definition. I've used textbook definitions of attention, but basically it's the mind's ability to isolate aspects of its environment. And that's not always a purposeful process, like a deliberate, intentional process, but it's always happening. So that's attention, is the little dot in the middle. And each direction represents a group, a functional grouping of where you can put your attention. And I'll just label all 4 of them because that'll make it easy. External attention. I like to put that on opposite of internal attention. Doesn't really matter where you put this stuff because it's not like the 5 phases, which does matter where you put it. But internal, external. Someone might say earnest cognition. This is all just, you just made this up. And the answer is yes. I did. I just made this up. I made it up so that I could remember it. I made it up so that I could do it. And I made it up so that I could share it. But most of all, I made it up so that I could do it. Because if I can't remember my practice, if I can't remember to direct my attention, then I'm not doing it. And that's what Qigong is. That's what the 4 directions is. And everything else I do in my life is based on this fundamental 4 directions. So we talk about Neidan, which is like an internal qi development. We talk about Qigong, which is, really learning to move and work with your own internal and external energy forces. The base of all of that for me is the 4 directions. It all comes from that. So I have 4 categories of where I can put my mind, and I'm being literal. Like I just can't be any more deadpan literal than that. Where is my mind? Where is my attention? And is it in one of these 4 categories? The answer is yes or no. And most importantly, though, have I chosen to put it there? And the best way to assure that you have chosen to put it there is to determine it in advance. That is called selective attention for my psychology friends watching. So selective attention is the mind's ability to select what it is paying attention to, what it is isolating out of its sensory experience, out of your environment. So functional, grouping. The reason it's functional is because this helps me remember. This helps me to be present to the point that I can be aware of myself. The kids today call it metacognition, awareness of awareness. But, we can dial that down a little bit and it's just, where are you in space and time? Do you know? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Are you aware in this moment of the factors that are creating your life experience? at least to some degree, or even trying, like, what are you doing? You're just thinking about this and that and the other thing, going down rabbit holes of repetitive, habitual thought, because that's also an option, but that's not a part of the four directions. Rumination, pensiveness, those are not a part of the four directions. Okay. Well, no, I guess it could be. Okay, so internal, external. External are five senses, period. I could get a little bit more woo-woo and we could start talking about vibration and all of that, but let's just keep it anatomical for now, because we could talk about sensory organs. And ironically, we call it external, but the assemblage of perception is an internal chemical process. So, but we still call it external because what we think that we're observing is outside of us. And, to some extent, that's a great way of talking about it. Very functional. So an external point of attention, that could be visual, that could be auditory, that could be olfactory, that could be tactile. We do like to include proprioception, which is awareness of your own body in relation to itself and the environment. Oh, I did this little thing with my fingers because that's a way to test proprioception. You close your eyes and you bring your fingers together. So external attention, internal attention, and I'm breezing through this because we have only so much time. The 3-hour lecture days are behind us. So external five senses, internal is body awareness. I'm going to keep it basic. Woo. Eventually you would talk about emotion because that's something that you feel. It's a chemical process. It's and you're able to sense it, and it becomes a part of your awareness. It becomes, as I like to say it, and it's kind of what I was leading up to, but it becomes a part of what I call the bubble of perception. And I'll explain that in a second as a part of the review. Yeah, believe it or not, this is all review. Like this is all, very, very early on stuff that we were talking about in 2017. It wasn't quite organized like this because I was still organizing it as I learned to work with it. Breath, well, that's pretty obvious, right? Breathing. The inhalation and exhalation of gases in the atmosphere. Yeah, it was breathing. I don't have to. Okay. Now, cognition's a zinger. This is in Chinese medicine. We would put a lot of this in the earth element because it's thought, attention itself, imagination, logic, reason. I think that deduction is just another form of logic, and I think that's redundant. So I'll just say logic and reason, which that's also a little bit, because reason itself is logical, but. So let me give you an example. In this moment, and it is not something I have done lately, but as I talk, I am aware of my breathing because I don't really like using and I don't like chewing over my words. So the best way to do that is to be very deliberate with the exhale and how I'm talking. And that helps. So I don't do it's a combination of and the, that type of speech, but it's also unconscious word choices. Sometimes people judge me because they think that I'm talking weird, but really what it is I don't like in myself to have unconscious speech patterns. So if I drop the F-bomb, I did that on purpose. Like I knew it in advance that I was going to do that. But that's just me. You do what you want with your four direction practice. So in this moment, I'm aware of how I'm breathing. I'm doing it very deliberately, very intentionally, very purposefully. I intended how I was going to do it in advance. So in terms of body awareness, I have been really paying attention to certain acupuncture points and channels on my body. It would be way too much to explain in this setting, but I'm not being abstract when I say that. When I say paying attention to it, I don't mean that this morning I did it or later I'm going to do it. I mean that as I'm speaking the words coming out of my face, I am also aware of these points on my body. Lo and behold, I can do them simultaneously, which is the reason for the 4 directions, by the way, so that you can do all 4 directions simultaneously. If you have too much attention in any one of the directions, you'll get a result, but it can be pretty hard to act or interact with your everyday life if you're over focused on just one of these directions. It's very hard to listen to somebody when you're overly focused on internal awareness. That's what a type of meditative state would be. A type of meditative state, not as if there's just one. There's an infinite, potentially, amount of different states we could achieve in meditation. So externally, well, I'm looking at the screen, and I'm doing it in a very particular way most of the time. I like to look at the entire screen. Of course, when I'm typing, I have to focus in, but right now, as I'm talking to you, and I don't know if, like, you have my camera pinned, probably not. We're probably looking at these 4 directions as I have them typed, but I'm looking at the entire screen at the same time. Why? Because it's intentional. No other reason, really. Like, it's not like I get some special power from looking at the entire screen. It's called inclusive vision, where you're trying to include as much as possible within your field of vision. The only reason I'm doing that is because it's purposeful. It roots me to the present moment. I'm doing that right now. Now, in terms of cognition, it is thought, because I'm talking, which primarily involves a couple different centers of the brain: processing and issuing and understanding verbal language. We use the same centers of our brain to talk as we do to talk to ourselves. And after a couple hundred hours of anatomy and physiology, I absolutely know that that's true. I've been tested on it. So in this moment, my focus is on certain thought processes. And I'm doing that intentionally, of course, because I'm hosting a Zoom meeting on the 4 directions. So that makes sense why my attention would be there. If I wasn't doing this, I would probably be doing something very different with my attention in terms of the cognitive direction. Especially because I'm not studying for comprehensive exams, which we will talk about at some point, because, oh, was there imbalance there? I had to think in words way more than I prefer. If I wanted to do well, I had to do that. So these are the 4 directions of attention. Why do I do this? So that I can remember it. Why did I make this into the 4 directions? So that I can remember it, and so that I can do multiple directions at once without overloading any one direction, making it very difficult to interact with my everyday life. Because when do we do this practice? When do I do this practice? All the time. Literally, I am in one of these 4 directions all of the time. Even in my worst of worsts, these past 3 months with studying for comprehensive exams and final exams, and all of the emotion and energy outside of me that's moving, that goes along with that, I was still able to maintain at least one direction of attention. I would have quit or got really angry at the system had I not had a practice in place. And of course, this is the foundation of what I call warrior practice, or the warrior spirit. And that's something totally different. But all of the things that I do come from this root of: where is my mind? Have I put it there intentionally? Am I present? Am I aware of my body, my mind, and my energy in this moment? The answer is yes or no. It can be 2 degrees. Even these directions of attention can be 2 degrees. I'm putting more attention into my words than I am into my body awareness. But then I shift it back sometimes because I need to make sure that I'm adjusted properly. And sometimes it's just one direction. but sometimes it's all four. And if I have all four directions of attention active, I am one really present guy. So that's a lot of information in just a short amount of time.